Hey, Maria. So let's get to work on this post. Now that you've had the chance to see me teach the lesson, I'm curious to hear what you noticed. And to reflect on the lesson, we're going to use the new teacher development areas, the analysis and reflection tool. So just like before, I'm sharing my screen with you and I have it teed up for us. So we're ready to go.
Awesome. Great.
So we'll start by going back into the competency that we focused on, which if you recall, it was shifting academic struggle to students. What evidence did you notice for that competency?
Okay. So from the very beginning, when students were working on the questions in their groups, I saw you were circulating and asking them questions just to make sure, I think, that they were working through the questions on their own, even when they weren't really sure if they got the question right or wrong.
I agree. So that's one of those instances that we talked about in the pre-observation conversation. Where asking students open-ended questions without giving them the answer right away can help them extend their thinking, right?
hmm Yeah. And another thing I noticed happened with Ethan's group, you said, let me look at my notes. You said, I'm going to come back and I want you to be able to say what problem happens and what's the difference between type 1 and type 2. So even though I wasn't sure whether you planned on that happening, I thought that that really pushed the students to persist with lesson content instead of you just telling them the answers or what they needed to know.
Yep, you're right. I hadn't planned on that, but I also knew that they could get there on their own as a group. So when I came back, that definitely, they already had it down and we were ready for the patient diagnosis. Did you notice anything else?
Um, okay, the one last thing I have for this indicator is how you asked each group member a different question before giving them the patient diagnosis. For example, when you got to Kia's group here, you started out by saying, okay, can you all answer questions about type 1 and type 2?
Mhm.
And then you ask Kia, what's the problem that leads to type 1 diabetes? And then you ask Kieran, what organ isn't working in that case? And then finally, you ask Isaac, what's the problem that leads to type 2 diabetes? And I think that made sure that every student, was engaged in understanding the content, not just one person out of each group.
Yeah, that's something I try to do often to make sure that there's individual accountability as well as group accountability. But wow, you really did a good job capturing evidence from the observation and linking it to the competency. So let's go ahead and look at the competency a little closer. What would you say might be some next steps for me to improve in this competency?
Okay. Let me see. I guess based on the language and the critical attributes, I might say maybe asking questions that have multiple possible answers, maybe. I think the students did a really great job answering the questions that had like one right answer. So maybe asking them questions that are more open-ended could be a next step.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. So I'm going to put it into the tool right now. You said asking them questions that are more open-ended. Anything else?
Let me see. In the competency, I also noticed that it includes language about students extending each other's thinking. So maybe in the future, we could set them up to ask each other questions, to build on each other's ideas instead of just you being the one asking them questions. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's great. I'm going to type that in here too. So set them up to ask one another questions to build on off their own ideas. Awesome. I love that. So as far as overall next steps, I know that we talked about taking a look at the exit tickets and the students that the students completed in order to see where they are in understanding the context. And I know that we don't have time to look at those now, but maybe one of our next steps could be to look at those exit tickets to see how they're progressing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how they responded on those.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in here for us so we know what to do next. Awesome. So this was so helpful, not just to have you observe, but also to hear the evidence that you noted from that lesson. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. I feel like I learned so much just from watching you in action. And so I know how much work you put in with the planning. So it's awesome to see it all, play out. And now I'm excited to see what they did with those exit tickets.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Maria.